Rain hammered the Kansas plain in long, silver ribbons, drenching the earth until it steamed beneath the low, gray clouds. The kind of storm that came out of nowhere, not the soft, predictable rain farmers counted on, but a wild squall that made the air smell like metal and ozone. Jake Turner squinted through the cracked windshield of his crop duster as lightning flickered over the horizon. The plane's old engine coughed, protesting against the sudden pressure change. He'd been dusting the north fields when the wind turned, fast and mean, forcing him to cut the route short. Now he was just trying to get home before the downpour drowned his landing strip. He could barely see 10 feet ahead, just a blur of wet wheat bowing under the storm. The radio sputtered with static. He gave up trying to reach base. The plane bounced in the air, wings shuddering, until he finally spotted the thin dirt road that wound toward his farm. He began to descend, slow and steady, careful not to skid out on the slick mud below. That's when something flashed in his peripheral vision, a pulse of orange light that didn't belong. Hazard lights. Jake frowned and angled the plane lower. There, maybe 100 yards off the road, was an SUV half buried in the ditch. Its tires spun uselessly in the mud, water pooling around the hood. Someone was inside. He could see movement through the fogged windshield. No one in their right mind would be out here tonight unless they had no choice. He circled once, engine groaning in protest, and then made a decision before he could talk himself out of it. With a few careful adjustments, he brought the plane down in a nearby pasture, wheels slapping mud and water. The propeller sputtered but held. He left the engine running just in case, grabbed his jacket, and sprinted toward the stranded car, rain stinging his face like needles. The woman inside jumped when he banged on the window. She rolled it down halfway, eyes wide and frantic. Mud streaked her cheeks, hair plastered to her forehead. "Are you okay?" he shouted over the roar of the storm. Her voice was hoarse. "You shouldn't have stopped. Ma'am, you're gonna get swept away in this," he said, gripping the door handle. "Come on, my place is just up the road. I can." She grabbed his wrist, hard enough to make him freeze. "You don't understand. You shouldn't be here. You don't know who's looking for me." For a moment, the words didn't register, not over the wind, not over the adrenaline pounding through his veins. All he saw was a woman in trouble, soaked to the bone, trembling with cold. "I don't care who's looking," he said finally, pulling the door open. "You'll die if you stay out here." Something flickered in her expression. Fear, maybe gratitude, and then she nodded, clutching a small metallic briefcase tight to her chest as she slid out of the SUV. Jake took her by the elbow and half-guided, half-dragged her through the mud toward the crop duster. The plane looked ridiculous under the storm, its yellow fuselage spattered with rain and grit. "You fly that thing," she yelled, incredulous, as thunder cracked overhead. "It's either that or swim," he shouted back, pushing her toward the side ladder. "Climb in." She hesitated for just a heartbeat, scanning the sky like she expected someone to appear out of the clouds. Then she climbed in, clutching the briefcase the whole time. Jake followed, slamming the canopy shut against the wind. Inside, it was dark except for the faint green glow of the instrument panel. The woman's breath came in ragged bursts, her knuckles white around the case. "What's your name?" Jake asked, trying to sound calm as he checked the gauges. She hesitated, eyes darting toward the rain-beaten windshield. "Lena," she said, finally. "Lena Monroe." "All right, Lena," he said, easing the throttle forward. "Let's get you out of this mess." As the plane lifted from the muddy field, lightning forked across the horizon, turning the world silver for an instant. Through the roar of the engine and the pounding rain, Jake caught her whisper, barely audible, meant for herself more than for him. "They found me." He didn't ask what she meant. He just gripped the controls tighter, flying low toward home, unaware that by helping a stranger in the middle of a storm, he'd just put himself in the crosshairs of something far bigger than either of them. By the time the sun rose over the horizon, the storm had spent itself, leaving the fields glistening and muddy under a pale, trembling light. Jake Turner sat on the worn sofa in his farmhouse, sipping black coffee, while Lena Monroe, now dry, but still tense, paced the small living room. The storm had left more than mud behind, it had left questions. Lena sat down finally, placing the metallic briefcase on the table in front of her. It was unremarkable in shape, but heavy, almost as if it contained the weight of the world itself. Jake eyed it cautiously, fingers drumming against the chipped mug in his hand. "That's a serious case you've got there," he said. She didn't answer at first, just stared at the briefcase as if it were alive, as if it could swallow her whole. Then she spoke in a low voice, more to herself than to him. "Everything inside this has to stay hidden. If the wrong people get it." She let the sentence trail off, but the implication hung in the room like smoke. Jake leaned forward. "Look, Lena, I don't know what's going on with you. I don't care about governments or spies. But if someone's after you, they're not gonna come knocking politely. I've seen a lot of storms in these parts, but none like this." Her lips tightened. "You don't understand." Before he could respond, the farmhouse door slammed open. The wind had pushed it ajar, rattling the frame like a warning. Jake turned just in time to see two black SUVs skidding onto the dirt lane outside, mud spraying in all directions. Their headlights cut through the haze, sharp and menacing, reflecting off the wet fields. Jake's stomach dropped. "Shit," he muttered, standing and moving toward the door. Lena's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "Stay back," she said urgently. "They'll know we're here," she whispered, grabbing the briefcase again. "You can't." But it was too late. The SUVs had stopped just past the front gate, engines idling, figures visible through the tinted windows. Jake didn't recognize them. No uniforms, just black suits and sunglasses, faces unreadable, expressionless. Adrenaline surged through him. Without thinking, he yanked open the barn doors, gesturing toward the old crop duster. "Plane's ready," he said. "We're leaving. Now." Lena hesitated, torn between fleeing and protecting the case. She finally nodded, gripping the handle tightly as they ran. The mud sucked at their boots, slowing them down, but they made it. Jake jumped into the cockpit, Lena following, clutching the briefcase against her chest. He fired up the engine. The propeller spun with a grating whine, the sound almost deafening in the stillness of the dawn. The moment the plane lifted off, Jake felt the ground drop away, the weight of the briefcase pressing against Lena's chest beside him. He banked hard, turning away from the approaching SUVs, the roar of the crop duster filling the air. The radio crackled, static cutting through the tension. Then a voice, crisp, authoritative, and unnervingly calm, came through. "Unidentified aircraft, you are ordered to land immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat. Land immediately." Jake froze, hands tightening on the controls. He had flown crop dusters all his life, but never had he been ordered around by a voice like that. "Who the hell is that?" he shouted over the wind. Lena's face was pale, her eyes darting toward the windshield. They have trackers," she said. "Military grade. They can follow us anywhere." "Then what do you want me to do?" Jake shouted back, scanning the horizon for a landing strip. "They want the briefcase," she said, her voice trembling. "They will stop at nothing." Jake cursed under his breath. He banked again, dodging between clouds that still hung low over the fields, the mud below glistening like waterlogged gold. The plane rattled and groaned, the propeller whining like it might give out any second, but he forced it higher, flying low enough to avoid radar but fast enough to keep distance. The house, the fields, the small town behind them disappeared in minutes. The quiet, isolated world Jake knew so well had vanished, replaced by something dangerous, unseen, and impossible to outrun. Lena clutched the briefcase tighter, muttering fragments of information he couldn't fully grasp, names and codes that seemed more like spells than anything real. Somewhere over the glistening plains, a shadow fell over them, a sleek shape, almost too fast to see. Jake's heart jumped. He glanced over his shoulder and caught it. A jet, black as midnight, descending from the clouds, its form unmistakable. Not a fighter he'd seen in movies, not anything civilian. An F-22. Its presence turned the morning calm into a battlefield. "Jake," Lena hissed, "hold steady. Don't do anything reckless. They won't hesitate." He gritted his teeth, fists clenched around the controls. He had no idea what they were after, no idea who Lena really was. But one thing was clear. The quiet farm life he knew had ended, replaced by a chase that stretched from the muddy fields of Kansas into skies that suddenly felt impossibly wide, and impossibly dangerous. And in that moment, as the jet shadowed them, Jake realized they weren't just running from people. They were running from something far bigger, far faster, and far deadlier than anything he had ever imagined. The F-22 appeared first as a shadow against the morning sky, sleek and silent, then in a flash, it was unmistakable, metal glinting, edges sharp, wings cutting through the air like a predator. Jake's crop duster rattled violently beneath him, its old frame groaning as if in protest. Every instinct he had screamed at him to land, to hide, to do anything that might keep the plane intact, but the sheer speed and size of the jet made every move feel insignificant. "Jake, watch out," Lena shouted, her voice tense, gripping the briefcase so tightly her knuckles turned white. She leaned forward, eyes wide as the F-22 dropped into formation above them. The jet's afterburners flared for a fraction of a second, and Jake felt a wave of heat wash over the cockpit. The plane shuddered under the sudden turbulence. He fought to keep the wings level, heart hammering in his chest. The radio crackled again, calm and commanding. "Mr. Turner, land the aircraft immediately. You are in restricted airspace. Compliance is mandatory." The voice carried no anger, only authority, precise and icy. Jake's stomach twisted. Restricted airspace. He had flown here all his life. Nothing in his world had ever felt this threatening. "I'm not landing," Jake yelled over the roar, though even he could hear the desperation in his own voice. "Not until we figure out what the hell is going on." Lena's eyes darted to him, panic flashing in their depths. "Jake, you don't understand. That jet isn't here to scare us. They're here to take the briefcase. You have to get it somewhere safe, fast. You don't have time to negotiate." The briefcase on the seat between them suddenly beeped, faint and urgent. Jake glanced at it, alarm flickering. A panel slid open, revealing a small screen with blinking numbers and letters, a countdown of some kind. Lena leaned in, whispering rapidly, "It's a lock override, military level. Someone is trying to access it remotely. If they get it..." She didn't finish the sentence, letting the implication hang in the tense air. Jake's mind raced. He had no experience with military hardware beyond what he'd seen in movies. And yet here they were, a tiny crop duster against a fighter jet, flying blind over flat plains with someone's top secret documents between them. He twisted the throttle, forcing the plane into a climb, weaving through low clouds. The jet followed effortlessly, its shadow swallowing the sunlight for a moment, and then retreating, as if measuring his skill. "This is insane," Jake shouted. "Why me? Why now?" "You were in the right place at the wrong time, or maybe the right time," Lena said, her voice calm but urgent. "That case chose you when it chose me. You're the only one who can get it out." She adjusted the briefcase on her lap, the metal surface cold and unyielding. "They'll stop at nothing. You need to trust me." Jake swallowed hard. He could feel the weight of her words, heavy, dangerous. His fingers tightened around the control stick, muscles tense, eyes locked on the horizon. The plane pitched, rolling slightly as he dodged a sudden gust. Below them, the field stretched endlessly, drenched in morning light, innocent and untouched. Above, the F-22 loomed, a silent predator testing the boundaries of his resolve. And then, as if sensing their desperation, the briefcase clicked. A small panel illuminated, revealing folders of documents, stamps of top secret, and a photograph, Lena Monroe, labeled clearly as Agent L. Monroe, missing. Jake felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The woman beside him was no ordinary person. She had just rescued herself in a storm, and now they were both caught in something far beyond his understanding. The radio hissed again, and Lena leaned forward, pressing a hand to her ear. "Jake, listen," she said. Her voice was sharp now, urgent. "They're not just after the case. They want me, and if they catch me with it..." She didn't finish the sentence, but Jake understood all the same. "Then what do we do?" he asked, voice tight, every muscle taut with tension. Lena's eyes flicked to the horizon, calculating. "We don't land. Not until we reach the extraction point. Trust me, you just have to get us there." Jake nodded, even though every instinct screamed danger. He forced the plane forward, weaving through the clouds and wind, each bump a reminder of the stakes. The F-22 matched him move for move, silent and lethal, but he refused to panic. He focused on control, on survival, on the knowledge that what lay in the briefcase was more important than his own fear. Minutes stretched like hours as they raced through the sky, the jet still pursuing, the storm of fate pressing down on them. And in that moment, Jake understood something crucial. Mistakes, luck, courage, all of it had led them here. And whether they survived or not depended entirely on their ability to fly fast, think faster, and trust in each other against odds that no one on the ground could ever imagine. Somewhere ahead, through the rolling clouds and broken light, he glimpsed the extraction point Lena had described, and for the first time since the storm, a glimmer of hope sparked. But the F-22 was relentless, shadowing them like a storm cloud made of steel, and Jake knew one thing with terrifying certainty: the real battle was just beginning.